Howdy all. This is Shred Kid. I'm back with part 2 of my 6.75 analysis video. My computer crashed halfway through the first one, so I'm going to do the back half, finish up the heroes, and then go on to the items. So without further ado, I believe that we were on Torn Chieftain. Now, for those of you who aren't following the Chinese Dota scene right now, he's very, very good. Like, he is first pick, first ban, and this is even before Lycan got nerfed. He was still being picked over Lycan. So, what he allows you to do, aside from getting the plus movement speed and plus damage, that's just ridiculous, is assault the tier 3 racks in a way that no other hero can really do. Because he can send his spirit out, you put it on the enemies near their tier 3, and you have a risk-free way of initiating, and you can either force them back from the tower as option 1, or option 2, if they don't go back from the tower, you stomp them, you send out your ultimate, and all of a sudden they're forced into a terrible engage. So, it's not a situation that you want to be again. You don't want to fight against the TC when you're defending your racks. However, one issue that he had was that if he wanted to get his ultimate, his stomp off correctly without a lot of risk to himself, a lot of times because the spirit mirrored his own motion, he'd have to go really far to the back to necessarily put the spirit where he wanted it to be. Now that it doesn't necessarily mirror your motion anymore, and you can actually cast it yourself, basically you'll be able to get just the right amount of distance away and position yourself even better before the fight starts. Honestly, you'll be able to hit more stomps when you're assaulting the tier 3, and even in ganks, you'll be able to hit people without necessarily running away from them. So you can chase people now and stomp them without running backwards if they're running away from you. So this is a massive buff, and I don't understand why Ice did it, because this hero right now is so powerful. This is a big buff, and the movement speed being nerfed was a very good thing, because if the movement speed was still 455, I think that would have been just absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, expect to see him as a top pick in 6.75 once he gets ported. Anyway, moving on, we're at Techies, it doesn't matter, these small nerfs, Techies is still irrelevant. Honestly, he's fun to push towers with, but that's about it. Templar Assassin is a hero who's very, very powerful in Dota 2, and Dota 1 for that matter, but she's recently been changed in Dota 2 so that the Psyblade's width actually reflects what it was in Dota 1, which means her laning has been nerfed by a lot. However, something gimpy that you could do with Templar Assassin, and it would be against necessarily basically any illusion hero, but it was usually versus a Naga Siren or a Chaos Knight, is if you hit the first illusion, that takes more damage, and then Psyblade spills that extra damage to the next illusion, which takes even more damage, which spills it to the hero, who gets one shot. Can't do that anymore. It's a good thing, because it was kind of gimpy. Ultimately, she's still pick-worthy. She's still very strong. A lot of teams in scrims and tournaments, at least in the NA scene, are banning her in the first round right now. So she is obviously very, very strong. Terrorblade basically got reworked into the old Terrorblade. You now can turn yourself into a ranged hero on a massive cooldown. You now have the old Reflection, which is a very good late-game nuke slow, but not as good early game. And you have the Zeal has been replaced, which Zeal was a really good early game spell. It was like a Ring of Health and a Hyperstone. And that is now just Conjure Image again. So he's kind of like the more old-school Terrorblade, where he's just kind of a stat carry. You build Manta, Scotty's great, Dominator's great. Basically just stat items, you know? They're really good on him. Also, Sunder is no longer blocked by a magic immunity. This means you can swap HP with people who are BKB'd. However, this isn't going to mean anything in competitive play, because if you see a low Terrorblade, you're just going to kill him. They're not going to let him get anywhere close to somebody to swap him. They'll just stun him and kill him. Ultimately, he's not going to be played. Tidehunter Ravage speed down. This is a buff to Force Staff. I don't think it's necessarily going to affect Tidehunter that much, but it's now much more possible to dodge his Ravage with the Force Staff. I mean, the biggest thing that comes to mind is Rubik. So if Rubik does the Dagger Force Staff build, which we saw Dendy do so many times in the International, it's very easy to Force Staff out, steal the Ravage, blink back in, and Ravage, or however you want to chain it together. Basically, it's a buff to Rubik, it's a nerf to Tide, it's a buff to Force Staff. Expect to see him just as much, though. I don't think, like, the numbers aren't big enough to make it a huge, huge difference. Okie doke. Tiny. So his toss cast range is now just a static 1300, which is really, really good, because one of Tiny's biggest issues was that in level 1 engages, so like if you're invading the enemy jungle and you guys clash, or they're invading yours and you guys clash, basically he couldn't really do anything in those fights. But now, with the toss range being so big, you can like throw your Venomancer in, throw your Tidehunter in, Vengeful Spirit, whatever, and all of a sudden, it's very hard to retreat from out of Tiny's jungle if you try to get into it, ward it, and then back out. So this is a buff to a defensive farming Tiny who's in his own lane, and the enemy comes into the jungle, tries to get wards down. Basically, you say, no, we're going to kill you now. This is a buff to the farming Tiny, basically. But don't expect to see him anymore. It's very small. He's already picked a decent amount, so he's a good hero. Anyway, we are now on to Tram Protector, who is, in my opinion, the winner of the patch. He got the biggest buffs, just, I would say, hands down. So if we take a look at what he does, damage, way up. This is very useful for him in the off lane. If he's in the off lane, a lot of times what happens is when you go in for a last hit as a melee hero, you'll take a lot of damage. But with increased damage, you can move in and get the hit when it's not necessarily as low as it would be on other heroes, and all of a sudden, you didn't take as much damage. It lets you take more last hits without taking as much harass. That's big. Base attack time increase. This doesn't mean anything. He already doesn't necessarily attack stuff. He just kind of sits there and casts spells and whatnot, and does 1 or 2 big attacks. So, not a big deal. Overgrowth doesn't damage anymore, but it lasts for longer, and the cooldown got decreased significantly. So all in all, you're like, okay, whatever. It's just still Tram Protector. But this is the big one. Living Armor has been completely reworked. Now, it's a targeted global spell that gives 6 instances of damage block. That's from level 1. 6 instances of damage block. And it heals you. And at rank 4, it's going to heal you or the tower for 200 damage. It's bananas. Like, it's absurd. It's so good. 2 opportunities that you can do with this. Opportunity 1, you go to the off lane. So say you're off lane, we'll go to the Radiant. We're off lane Treant. We're just chilling over here, trying to get some EXP. You can invis for some EXP, it's whatever. But you cast your, basically, Refraction Heal on mid lane. Mid lane's going to win. Mid lane just isn't going to lose anymore. It's so good. And in the safe lane's obviously going to slam whatever gets thrown against it. If it's a try versus try scenario, you're going to win it. 2v1 scenario, you're going to slam it. So basically, it's a lane winner for other lanes if you put him in the off lane. Option 2, you put him as a safe lane farmer. If he's in the safe lane farmer, what's probably the case is that you have a semi-carry mid, such as Invoker or Templar Assassin, or maybe you even have like a dual lane mid, like, I don't even know, Morphling, he might be solo mid, maybe he's a dual lane mid with CM, whatever. But, point is, he's going to take on the role of a utility farmer, such as an Undying, such as a Necrolite, whatever. So, you're going to get your mech up, you're going to get your pipe up, whatever, team mana items, team tank items, team armor items, even maybe a Vlad's, and you're just going to go for a timing push on the racks, and it's going to be so hard to defend against. Basically, your offlaner is going to take so little damage and heal for so much that she can, I was thinking Windrunner in that instance, she can just literally go toe-to-toe in a 2v1 situation. Or your mid laner is still going to win by a lot. It's absurd. It's so good. Expect the skill to be maxed by level 7 over Leech Seed. So, I think he's first pick, first ban material. I could be very wrong, but I think that he's going to be amazing. Troll Warlord, doesn't matter. It's Troll, and it's a tiny buff. Don't expect to see him anymore. So, this is cool. Tuskar now carries Necro units in with you, or Illusions, should you choose to get Illusions, but in Dota 1, something you could do, and I don't know if it's going to work in Dota 2, is you roll onto someone, you Ice Wall them, and then you get your Necrobook units out, and they're forced into a cage match with you, and they can't run away. So if you can do this now and snowball in with them, I'll have so much fun in pubs with it. You can't run away from it. You can't fight it. In all seriousness, it's not like a serious buff or anything. It's whatever, but hey, doesn't hurt. Snowball cooldown's been decreased. Not a big deal. The Walrus Punch crit has been increased for the higher HP targets. Not a big deal, and a cosmetic change. He'll be a fringe pick in the NA scene, I think, but he's not really going to be seen at all. Okie doke. On to Undying. Undying is already a hero that's people are really starting to realize how strong this hero is in timing pushes, or an aggressive lane, like aggressive tri-lanes. So, basically, Decay has been seriously buffed. Up to 40 seconds at max rank, I think people are going to take, 1 and 2 and heal. They already do, but they're going to continue taking like 1 or 2 and heal and then maxing Decay. It's going to be so freaking hard to kill an Undying who's got the mech pipe up or Vanguard pipe, Vanguard bloodstone, whatever, what have you, when his Decay stays for that long. The AoE's been increased, so you can get maybe an extra hero in it, and Tombstone is just now better. Honestly, he's not going to be a core pick, but expect him to be seen sort of often in the 4 or 5 slot. I know I've seen him in North American scrims a lot. I've seen him in Chinese tournaments sometimes. I've seen him in Southeast Asia. I've seen this hero everywhere. I think everybody sort of realizes that he's a good hero. You need to pick him sort of as a surprise for the 4th or 5th pick. He's a great farming utility hero. So, Ursa Warrior, thank God, because he destroys high-level pubs and low-level pubs just the same. It doesn't even matter to him. You now actually have to use the cast animation and cast overpower, so you can't run at people and kill them for free. This is good, because now you can actually run away from a phase boot Ursa who's trying to give you hugs, and you're like, no hugs, Ursa, no hugs, and he's running at you. You can actually escape from him now, which is great. VS Agigain increase, doesn't matter. Oh, so I would say he's just going to be not as dominant in pubs anymore, but he's still pretty good in pubs. VS Agigain increased, I don't think it's relevant, but you can actually, if you do like a drums metal build and give her a little bit more farm, what this does is, if you get to like mid-late game, you can actually attack for a little bit. You can force other supports away from you by just attacking them down. So, I don't think she's going to be seen anymore, but it's something useful that she has that other supports don't. Okay, Venomancer, Plague Ward Vision decreased, that's great, it encourages more ganking. A lot of times Venomancer is used as like an anti-gank machine, because you can just see if people are running at you, so that's great. Viper, just some small numbers tweaks. He's not going to be seen a lot more. Visage, it doesn't matter. Visage is still horrible. He's just not going to be seen. Even though he's just got a bunch of little tweaks, it's not going to be better. Warlock. Okay, this is actually, I think, kind of relevant. So, one of Warlock's issues in lane is that he doesn't have any disables. So a lot of times you'll want to run him as either a dual lane supporter against a solo person, so when you have a jungler. But the issue with that is you haven't got any disable to force the offlaner away. So Windrunner can kind of force them away. Or, I'm so sorry, my mind's just going to Windrunner today. Venge can force him away with the stun. Shadow Demon's got Disrupt. I mean, everybody. Venom's got the slow. Tide's got the slow. But Warlock doesn't. You kind of just skill into the heal and then the Fatal Bonds, usually. However, with the buff for Shadow Word, especially at low levels, like the 10 to 15 is kind of a big deal, and the 20 to 25 is a big deal, it means that you can get just 1 or 2 ranks in Shadow Word, which should be sufficient in order to heal your carry, like a Spectre or whatever, because it'll probably be a passive lane if you have Warlock. And what it allows you to do is you can actually get 1 rank of your slow earlier, which means you can actually have some disable pre-6. And if you even need to, you can max the Fatal Bonds earlier, which means you deal more damage in team fights. Basically, it means that you might not necessarily want to max Shadow Word by 7 every single time anymore. You might want to just get 1 or 2 in it and then go from there. It's basically trying to make him more relevant early when he doesn't have stuns. So it's kind of shoring up one of his weaknesses. Witch Doctor, Maledict bonus damage has been increased significantly for the lowest levels to 16. This is great because a lot of times on Witch Doctor, what you want to do by level 7, you're going to want to have your stun maxed at 1 through 5, 7, right? But you want to get your heal at 1 and Maledict at the other. But Maledict at rank 1 Maledict just isn't that good. However, rank 1 Maledict's better. It kind of fixes Witch Doctor's issues because Witch Doctor is by nature a defensive support. He's very good when he has high ground, and he's very good when people are trying to dive on one single target and converge on that target. So that's when the stun really bounces. He is a defensive support, don't get me wrong. But right now supports in the metagame, it's just offensive supports are typically favored. So this is trying to give him a little bit of offense without completely just forcing him to fit the meta. I like it. I think it's a great change. Zeus. Man, Arc Lightning cooldown gets shorter every patch, or something about it changes. But the big one is his ult is on a shorter cooldown. Doesn't matter, don't expect to see him. Okie doke. Now we get to items, and this is when some of the meat and potatoes gets in, because there are some big changes to items. Shadow Amulet, a new item. Basically, you get to stand still, you have a fairly serious fade time, and then you just sit still in invis. it's a good... Basically, the reason why people will get this is, one, the only real Lothar's heroes right now in the competitive metagame are Kanka. That's it. I can't really think of anyone else who seriously buys a Lothar's. And this isn't going to help him. However, Lothar's is a favorite of pub heroes. And some pub heroes who actually do okay with it, I'm not recommending it on them, but they can do okay with it, are not Shadowfiend. Sniper and Drow Ranger are two of the best. This sort of gives them a pseudo-crappy escape. At the worst case scenario, it's going to give them long enough for TP support to show up. So it's a buff to crappy carries in pubs, is what this is, basically. However, I mean, expect to see some things where Tide, like, gets it. Maybe, okay, weird scenario. Tidehunter's got 1,700 gold. He can't sell anything to get his dagger, and you need to contest the next Roshan because you know the enemy's going to do it in 1 minute and you haven't got map control. Idea. Buy the Shadow Amulet, sneak into the Roche Pit, turn it on, ravage them all, steal it, and win the game off of that. Not saying it's going to happen in competitive, but, I mean, expect people to think up some weird uses for this item. Like, I can see it being kind of cool on Puck. Obviously, you're not going to want to spend that much money on it, but it'll be fun on Puck. Could be fun on Templar Assassin to just invis, blink, run away, you know, like crazy stuff, but expect some creative uses out of this, to say the least. Abyssal Blade can now be disassembled. This is so cool. I love to make Rapier. Everybody loves to make Rapier. Now when you're losing, say you picked, I don't know, Anti-Mage, Lycan, whatever, and you have an Abyssal Blade up, and you're late game, and you're winning, and then you're not winning anymore, and you start to lose team fights, and you think, oh crap, guys, we need a Rapier. Well, now you can get it. It's much more easy to make a Rapier, because you disassemble it, you still have a Basher, which is really good, but you can easily make the Rapier out of it. This is a buff to Rapier and a buff to melee carries, who get out-carried ultra late game. Ancient Django of Endurance. Okay, this is, I think, absolutely huge. This is one of the biggest item changes after Armlet. But here's the deal on this. Django has been so good for so long. Supports can make it and get a lot of extra tankability up, but the big deal is that carries can make it, or at least semi-carries. So the ones who come to mind are Luna loves to make it, Chaos Knight loves to make it, Invoker, and this is, I'm going to talk more about the Invoker, but it's just got so many uses with the extra damage. It's just crazy. So here's the deal. We talked about earlier the Invoker having less damage, got nerfed by 4 damage, so it's kind of a nerf to the QW build. It tries to tone down the killing of the QW build. This is another nerf to that, because most QW Invokers will elect to get a Django of Endurance. In Dota 2, this is called Drums. I use them interchangeably, but anyway. Point is, in my opinion, and this is a really heavily debated topic, QW Invoker has just as much solo killing power as QE Invoker, if you get the levels up, and you should. With a Cold Snap into EMP, into whatever you want, necessarily finish with the Tornado, basically what happens is because you move and attack so fast, even though you attack for less damage, you get more attacks off, and because of CC, you get even more attacks off. So you have a lot of solo killing power. However, you don't have a lot of damage. So a lot of times when you're playing QW Invoker, you kind of finish somebody with just one last hit, and then that's it. Like, you just get one hit, and that's all you were going to get because of the movement speed, you outrun them. But a lot of times, it's just the way that the damage and the timing works, and it's hard to explain, but your last hit that you would have gotten anyway is the one that kills them. Now, with the drum damage decreased, with the QW damage decreased, say you hit somebody 5 times in a gank, they're going to take 50 less damage. They're going to live from that gank if you can't get that extra hit off. So this is a good change. It's a good nerf to Invoker, although I don't think it was necessary. A lot of other people did. It's a great nerf to CK and Luna also, who, like to get the damage actually as a carry thing, as an early carry item. But either way, Drum's been so good for so long. Arcane Boots. Replenish mana cooldown increased. So this is a decrease on aggression, basically. Because a lot of times supports build Tranquils, which means that they're at high HP, and the farming utilities, or the junglers, like to build the Arcane Boots. And what this means is that they will be able to be at full health and full mana for most fights, so you don't really have to build anything, and you can be really aggressive with your spells and HP, and you can just kind of throw stuff at people. However, with the replenished mana cooldown increasing, this is a serious buff to QW Invoker because EMP is going to be a lot better, but it's also basically just a way of saying, hey, let's tone down the aggression a little bit, which is kind of weird because Ice Rock's been all about increasing aggression over the last couple patches. So this actually kind of doesn't fit the metagame, or not the metagame, but his buff nerf trend, but I think that it's a good change because they've been so good, really. You need an Arcane Boots on every team. Okay, this is the big one. This is the biggest change. So we are now at Armlet of Morrigan. Otherwise, I think in Dota 2 it's just known as Armlet. Here is the deal. Armlet has always given amazing burst HP. Gives great attack damage for strength carries, and just great survivability with the toggle. But the toggle only works every 5 seconds. Well, not anymore. So, in my opinion, there really isn't a reason to build Vanguard anymore, except maybe on, let me think. No, Undying would build Armlet. Weaver would build Armlet if you wanted to do that build. Crap, I mean, I can't even think of anybody who should build Vanguard over Armlet anymore, because with the Armlet HP regen increased to 8, so it's about equal to that of Vanguard, your HP regen is going to be ridiculous, and with a 1 second toggle on Armlet, it means if they can't do 200 or 300 or whatever it is damage in 1 second, you're just going to heal and then continue fighting. So what this is, one, it buffs dots. Because if you have to go back down to 1 HP and then go back up and then back down, you're going to die if you have a dot. So it's a buff to Quap, buff to Venomancer, buff to everybody who has a dot. However, this is a huge buff to strength heroes and even anybody who builds Vanguard. So here are the biggest winners from this. Alchemist. It was already decent on him, but most people had to get Vanguard early for the early survivability. Not anymore. You're going to get an Armlet. Doombringer. No more Vanguard. You're going to get the Armlet. You're going to hit people for harder. Heal. It's going to be harder to kill you. Slardar. Armlet instead of Vanguard. Let's think. Undying will probably get an Armlet. Maybe he'll get a Vanguard. I don't think so. Weaver. Armlet. It's just... It's ridiculous how good this item is now. Sven. Gonna get an Armlet. Even though he didn't even build Vanguard. He will get Armlet. Skeleton King and Nake's already got an Armlet, but they're going to be that much better with it. Basically, you're going to take a lot of damage from people who hold Armlet, and it's going to be hard to kill them. This is a big change. Expect it to start phasing out Vanguard. I don't think we're going to see that much Vanguard after this patch if this remains as the 1 second toggle and the 8 HP regen per second. BKB can no longer be sold. While this would have been ultra important a few years ago, whoops, I did not mean to hit that key. I don't think it's as big anymore because people rarely get the amount of money and to the point in the late game where you're selling BKBs and rebuying it. So basically what happens is your BKB gets down to 5 seconds. You say, hey, I'm kind of running out fast in these team fights. Here's what I'll do. I already got a lot of attack damage items, a lot of survivability items. I'm just going to sell my BKB, and rebuy it for half the price. You can't do that anymore. So it's a nerf to late game BKB carries. I don't think it's going to affect anything because nobody's really doing this in competitive anyway. Blade Mail damage return increased. Not a big deal. Buff to people who like Blade Mail, which is, I guess, Undying is one of them. Not that many people really build it. Bloodstone. Charges now increment if you get a kill out of range. I was trying to think about who this is useful on. Like, who gets kills out of range with a Bloodstone? Like, who even builds Bloodstone? Storm does it. He'll be in range for kills. Necrolite does it sometimes. He'll be in range for kills. I mean, Undying will be in range. Oh, maybe Undying if he gets a zombie kill. I don't know. I think it's more of just it logically makes sense that this would work this way as opposed to fixing anything. I guess Zeus, even though he never ever appears in competitive, gets kills out of range, but it's not really a big deal. Bariza increased. Here's the thing. People have been favoring MKB over Bariza for a while now. What normally happens is you get, say, on a range hero like Potom, they would build Manta into MKB, or really on most heroes, it was MKB would be your first serious big damage item. And the reason why they do this is because it gives you the uphill chance. You won't miss uphill anymore when you're attacking the tier 3 racks. or tower in this case, which is a huge deal because it means that you can actually attack towers much more easily without necessarily taking as big a risk. If they try to go on you, you'll be further back. You can retreat more easily. So this is Ice Frog trying to say, hey guys, this is still an item, right? Get Daedalus, which is what it's called in Dota 2. You know, get this item still. Maybe some people will get it, but I don't think it's a big enough buff to people for people to seriously want to get it. I don't know. I feel like the utility gotten from MKB is kind of outclasses the damage from Barisa. Dagon. Okie doke. So, as everybody knows, this, along with Dagger, is the best item in the game. Because everybody loves Dagon. You should get it on every hero. It's core. So, here's the deal. If you're playing Nyx Assassin or Furion, you're gonna need to get a Dagon 5. That's just how it works. So, or even Tinker, but that can be a serious item choice, and we don't want to be too serious with this. So, the Dagon cooldown decreased at higher levels. Well, at lower levels it gets decreased by 5, and it gets decreased by a little bit more, so that finally at rank 5 Dagon, the best item in the game, it's a 15-second cooldown. It's absurd. I mean, in all seriousness, the only hero you should actually be building Dagon 5 on in a serious game is probably Tinker, but here's the deal. I've been playing Nyx Assassin like non-stop recently in pubs, and while Dagon 1 I feel is strong on him, if you want to mess around, like there are situations in which Dagon 5 is a serious choice on him, and although he will not probably appear that much in competitive, even with the reflect change, he might be seen as a fringe pick, but if you actually go for Dagon 5 on him, he'll be a late game powerhouse in terms of the damage he deals. His mana burn combined with the Dagon is just so much damage. Like, instead of just picking someone off instantly, he'll be able to contribute with DPS to team fights. And you can't target him because it reflects. So this is mostly geared at Nyx because Tinker doesn't even benefit from the Dagon cooldown. I'm getting a little bit pubbish with my scenarios that I'm going into, but again, maybe we'll see it on Nyx. I don't think it's a big deal though. Stygian Desolator. Duration increased from 7 to 5. This is kind of easy. One of the reasons why you can get Stygian is if you're not necessarily a damage dealer, but someone who has, you know, sort of relevant auto attacks, but not the main carry, is just to get the armor debuff on people. So what you might see happening is a hero who isn't getting it for the damage, but is getting it for the debuff. So, or maybe I'm using the wrong term, but basically you attack, instead of focusing one target who you want to kill with the Desolator, you can get it on more targets, which is kind of a big deal. I mean, Ice Frog's been buffing this hero for a while. If you can get it on every target, or maybe even 3 targets in a team fight, they're all going to be taking a little bit more damage, which is great. Also, it's going to push a little bit harder. Like, say you're going to auto-attack a tower once and then you have to back up, the creeps are going to hit it for a while. So, it gives a little bit more pushing utility, but I think the big deal is the debuffs. Okie doke. Big deal time, Ethereal Blade. And by big deal, I mean it's not relevant at all in competitive, but it's going to be super fun in pubs. So, Ethereal Blade can now be cast on allied units, so you can save them in the style of Pugnant Decrep. However, you can now, or the damage is now based on the primary attribute of the holder. So, Furion's going to be zapping people harder with his Dagon 5 Ethereal build. That's a big deal. I think it's going to be so much fun to get it with Pudge, even though it won't work with Hook because it's pure damage. I think Centaur is going to be awesome with it. He's going to rock because he has so much plus strength. Basically, it'll be fun. However, the mana cost, and this is a really big nerf to Morphling. I was talking earlier in my video about how Morphling can't really get away with Ethereal Blade first anymore because of some of his changes. It's a lot more risky for him to do so. So, let's say he goes in, he Ethereal Blades somebody, as he has, say, Treads Aquila, Ethereal Blade Bottle. He goes in, he Ethereal Blades them, he's already at really high Agi, very low HP from this combo, and he kills them. But he's going to be 100 mana lower now that with the Ethereal Blade mana cost change. Wow, I cannot speak today. So he'll have less mana, and with the morph change, it's going to be a lot harder for him to get out. So ultimately, this is, while you can still get Ethereal Blade first, it is a lot more risky. And I'm going to be honest, any nerf to Morphling is something I'm happy to see. It's been my least favorite hero to play against since like 6.68, I think. Yule Scepter of Divinity. Well, obviously this is a buff, just a straight buff. But we're going to compare this to Force Staff. Force Staff no longer pushes through Kinetic Field. The recipe cost has been increased by 200, and it's triggered by Power Cogs. Or forcing someone over Power Cogs triggers it, which we already went into. But the big deal is that Force Staff is so good. Everybody loves to build it. It's just such an amazing item. But it no longer goes through Kinetic Field. So here's what I'm thinking. You're playing Invoker against a Disruptor. One of the reasons you pick Disruptor, and he has a lot of weird niche pick reasons why you might want to get him, AoE Wombo combo, maybe trying to silence a Pandas, Enigma, or Tidehunter before their ultimate, sending back a Furion or Tinker. But one of the main reasons you want to get him is to punish teams who aren't mobile. So, or alternatively, are overly mobile. So, say you're up against, I don't know, someone who's traditionally very hard to kill, Queen of Pain, Anti-Mage, whatever. You put them in the field and you silence them. They go, whatever, my allies, Invoker, or whoever, is just going to Force Staff me out. Well, you can't anymore. So, this is a huge buff to Thrall, or Disruptor, who's already a fairly good hero in his own right. He's been starting to get picked up more and more often. But, what kind of comes to mind is that if Invoker gets trapped in the Kinetic Field silence, instead of just getting punished and taking a ton of damage, he can just Yules himself. So I think what this is doing is, one, a lot of QW Invokers prefer to get Yules anyway because of the move speed and mana regen, but it's very rare in a serious game to see a Yules on a QE Invoker. In pubs you see it because people love to do the Yules Tornado Blast combo, but in serious games people prefer to have Tornado in the rotation and the Meteor, so they like Force Staff up, they'll Tornado someone, Meteor, invoke Blast, and then blast them immediately. So I think this might be Ice Rog trying to push Invoker into getting Yule Staff on a QE Invoker, or Yule Scepter, as opposed to Force Staff. Because a QE Invoker can't really run away really fast anyway from the Kinetic Field, so I think this is kind of, again, forcing, or buffing, that is, a QE Invoker. Geometry Sight, restock, cooldown increase from 8 to 10 minutes. The obvious applications. It's a buff to Invis heroes, it's harder to get rid of wards, and it's more important to keep your gem up. Not so obvious applications. It'll be easier to take Roshan if it's not warded. That's, I think, the biggest thing that came to mind, and obviously Riki and Bounty Hunter are going to be a pain. Also, Nyx Assassin buffs, just saying. Okie doke. Heaven's Halberd, disarm, duration on ranged heroes increased. I think this is an anti-morphling measure. A lot of times, just the way the ban pick works, if you're against a morphling, you might have a tanky strength carry, such as, say, Slardar, maybe, I don't know, DK, Chaos Knight. I think it might be Ice Rock trying to say, hey, you can, get rid of morphling attacking you. Okay. Helm of the Dominator. This is a big change. Dominate cooldown decreased from 300 to 60. Before, you dominated something, and that was it for 5 minutes. But it had a duration. However, this was done to prevent you from getting 700 creeps and just getting a creep after creep after creep. Now it replaces them, but the big change is that you can actually use these creeps in fights. Because before, what you would do is you just use them to stack Ancients and keep them safe. However, this gives a lot of carries who get Helm of Dominator. It gives them a lot more presence early. Sniper can now have a Troll Trap to trap people who are trying to kill him, or he can have a Centaur to protect him, or maybe Luna might have, I don't know, she'll get the Speed Aura to help her team even more, or her even more. So, what else have we got? You can do, obviously, it protects people who like to stack Ancients a lot, because if the creep gets killed, you can still keep stacking. But honestly, I think it's to give Dominator carries some escape mechanism or presence early, and the two ones that come to mind are Sniper and Dro, who are so underpowered right now, and also Luna, who comes to mind, but she's pretty decent right now. Lothar's Edge, remade. Duration increased, not a big deal. Recipe reworked to include the Shadow Amulet. Whatever, no big deal. Manta Style cost increased. Honestly, the two main people who are getting it right now, three main I guess, are Luna, Chaos Knight, and Morphling, none of who need to be stronger. Honestly, it's just mostly intended to buff, or nerf Morphling, I think, but Yasha's cheaper now, which means for people who get that early Yasha up, as a DPS item, it's going to help. So the one who really, actually two who really come to mind who get the early Yasha, get the Yasha much faster, and that's Shadow Fiend and Potom, Priestess of the Moon, otherwise known as Mirana. He'll be able to beat just a little bit faster, a little bit more dangerous, a little bit harder to kill early. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot the main Mantis Cell Carrier, Anti-Mage. It's a nerf to Anti-Mage. Yay, no more Anti-Mage. Okay. Mask of Madness, movement speed bonus increase from 25 to 30%. Sing Sing will be happy, Spirit Breaker will be happy, but nobody really cares about this item anyway. Also, Sange and Yasha, I believe, are now 100 gold cheaper, so it's just a buff to Sange and Yasha. That's kind of what that was, because Manta's just, basically, Manta's just better than Sange and Yasha. I mean, it just is. It's, if you think of both have the Yasha, whatever, right? But, what would you rather have? A Sange, which gives you some strength and a really crappy slow, or an Ultimate Orb, which gives you almost as much strength, which also gives you intelligence, which also gives you an evade to evade stuns and stuff with the split, and split pushing, and confusion, and more damage. It's crazy. It's just, I am firm on this that Manta is just better than SNY. And he's just trying to force people to say, hey, maybe consider SNY. Null Talisman. Nobody really builds this as much as Bracer or Wraith, because Wraith and Bracer build into useful stuff. Null Talisman doesn't really. I mean, it builds into Dagon, but nobody really builds that. So I think by decreasing it from 170 to 155, people such as Storm Spirit might be more tempted to get one in lane. Maybe even Krob, I don't know. Queen of Pain, just stuff like that. It's a buff to those heroes. Observer Wards, this is big. Okay, so the 200 to 150 price change on Observer Wards means that as a support, one, you'll be able to get more wards up, but two, this is the big one. Early game, the biggest thing is that you will have an extra clarity in your inventory because of this. If you have one more clarity, it means you can gank mid more often. It means you can gank, say, fight more often, try to harass your lane more often. I think on paper this looks like it's a nerf to aggression because it means that you can have more observer wards out, but I don't think so. Because in high-level games, the wards are going to be bought out on cooldown anyway. There will always be wards on the map. However, giving those supports that early extra clarity at the beginning of the game, basically it means they have one more stun, one more engage, so expect one more gank out of supports early. I think it's a buff to aggression. Orb of Venom decreased, or cost has been decreased from 350 to 275. So, obviously it's amazing on Syllabear, buff to Syllabear, although it's not a big deal because he really kind of saves up for a ton of gold until, well, Radiance anyway. Barathrum can get it, I guess, even though I don't think he's amazing. Night Stalker, I think, should experiment with this item. Maybe it's worth it, maybe it isn't. It's not like Night Stalker doesn't have item slots, you know? He has item slots. And the big one that comes to mind is, I hate to be on this tangent over and over again, but someone told me, shout out to Datdalt, that you should try it out on Nyx Assassin, and I think it's really good. Because a lot of times you need one or two extra autos to kill someone, especially if you're kind of under-leveled early. Maybe you have a crappy early game, but this lets you get those one or two extra autos off, so it's kind of nice. So I think it's worth it on maybe some heroes. Either way, it's so cheap that if you don't have to, you know, spend your item slots on other stuff, why not get it, you know? If you're not really trying to go for an ultra-fast item that you have to get up super fast, why not go for it? Orchid, Soul Ring damage has been amplified. Again, I was mentioning how it was better on Storm. Now it's even better on Storm. It's better on Clinks. It's a buff to him. But I think Storm and Clinks are the main ones. I think Ice Frog might be trying to get Broodmother to start building it again because Broodmothers have been favoring Midas into, like, or Manta style recently, but whatever. Anyway. Power Treads, attack speed bonus increased. It's fairly simple. People get Power Treads. It's more of a carry item now, less of a survivability item. A lot of times you used to see supports getting it because of the tankability, but with the tankability nerfed, it's going to be more useful for the attack speed bonus. So I think Shadow Fiend, I think Priestess of the Moon, I think Queen of Pain. Those are the main three heroes that I play who use it. Who else uses it? Morphling uses it. Chaos Knight uses it. Sometimes Lunas do. But Slardar, basically... Oh, and all, of course, Bash heroes, but it's better now as a carry item, and it was worse before as a survivability item, so expect more carries to get Power Treads. Let's see. What else? Radiance buffed. Doom and Alk. It's the only things I can think of off the top of my head. Obviously, it's a buff to PL, especially with his new late game extra versatility with the Agi, but PL's not going to be seen anyway. So mainly I view this as a Doombringer Alchemist buff. Rod of Atos is still crappy. Hate to say it, it's still not a good item. Gives you more HP by 75, but no big deal. Okay. Couple more big things. Smoke of Deceit no longer hides you from Panda Ultimate, which buffs Panda's mid lane. A lot of times mid laners, or even off laners if Panda was safe lane solo, would just buy a smoke. So when Panda hits 6, he ults, you smoke, whatever, wasted. So now, even though Panda got slammed by the change to Enigma Black Hole, this is a nice little buff for him. Soul Ring. Cooldown increased. Again, I think that mana is so prevalent right now. Obviously, with the nerf to this, the nerf to mana boots, it's a buff to mana burners, such as Anti-Mage, such as Nyx Assassin, such as Invoker. Anti-Mage and Invoker are the two main ones. But it's also a buff to people who give you mana. And by people who give you mana, I mean person who gives you mana, I mean Keeper of the Light as a lore. So it's a buff to him. Tranquil Boots, break requirement decreased from 4 to 3. Not really surprised. It was really helping supports tank up. Veil of Discord. Oh, this is a lot of stuff. Let me reread this because I kind of forgot. Armor increased, HP increased. Nah, it's better, but I still think it'll be mostly seen if you have like an SK Queen of Pain lineup. A lot of it. Like, I don't think this change would force you to get it when you wouldn't have already gotten it. It just makes it better when you do get it. And finally, Yasha decreased. I went over this. So I think that brings this video to an end. Hopefully it wasn't too ghetto being in 2 parts and, you know, maybe crappy quality. I don't know. I'm working on my videos, but this is the first one I've done on my own. I'm proud of it, even though it might suck. And I will have many more videos to come. I'm going to be doing a bunch of playthrough walkthroughs on heroes I like. I did an Invoker video a long time ago. I want to do more stuff like that, basically. I'm going to get into commentating more Dota content produced. So now that I finally worked my tech issues out, even if the first one might not have worked so well, expect more to come. So more stuff will be on this channel at ShredKidDota. I hope you enjoyed. If you didn't enjoy, give criticism. Even if you did enjoy, give criticism. I want to know what I need to change. So anyway, thanks for watching if you managed to put up with me for 2 hours or whatever it was, and hope to see you